I still remember the sound of the rain hitting the coffee shop window. It wasn't loud, but somehow it drowned out everything else. The room was full of people talking, laughing, living their normal lives. Mine was about to fall apart. Across the table sat the woman I had loved for 4 years. Emily looked beautiful as always. Her white coat, perfect makeup, and calm smile made it impossible for anyone to guess what she was about to say. She didn't even look nervous. She simply stirred her coffee and finally looked into my eyes. "I don't think we should get married." For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. I laughed. She didn't. The smile disappeared from my face. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. She took a deep breath. "I've met someone else." Those 5 words felt heavier than anything I had ever heard. Someone else? Just 2 weeks earlier, we had been choosing flowers for our wedding. We had argued about honeymoon destinations. We had talked about buying a small house together. Now she was telling me there was another man. I tried to stay calm. "Who is he?" She looked away before answering. "His name is Richard." I had never heard that name before. "What does he do?" She hesitated for only a moment. "He owns several companies." I understood immediately. He was rich, very rich. She must have seen the expression on my face because she quickly added, "It's not about the money." But we both knew that was a lie. I wasn't poor. I had a decent apartment, a reliable car, a stable business. I worked hard every single day. But compared to a millionaire, I had nothing. I looked at the engagement ring on her finger, the same ring I had spent months saving for. "I thought you loved me." She slowly removed the ring and placed it on the table. I did. That single word hurt more than anything else. Did not do. Did love that once existed, love that had already died. She stood up. "I'm sorry." No tears, no hesitation, no looking back. She walked toward the door without turning around once. The bell above the entrance rang, and just like that, she disappeared from my life. I sat there for what felt like hours. The waiter came over twice to ask if I needed anything. I couldn't answer. I just stared at the ring lying on the table. 4 years, gone in less than 10 minutes. That night I walked home alone. The apartment felt strangely empty. Her favorite mug was still in the kitchen. Her sweater still hung behind the bedroom door. The wedding invitations were stacked neatly on the dining table. Everything reminded me of the future we had planned together, a future that no longer existed. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice. "I've met someone else." The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Friends wanted to know what had happened. Family members asked if the wedding was still on. I ignored every message. Then one notification caught my attention. Emily had posted a photo online. She was standing beside Richard. Both of them were smiling. The caption read, "Sometimes life leads you to the person you're truly meant to be with." Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, people congratulating them, people calling them the perfect couple. No one knew she had ended our engagement less than 24 hours earlier. No one knew she had shattered my heart before posting that smiling picture. I stared at the screen until my hands started shaking. For the first time in my life, I cried. Not because I had lost the woman I loved, but because I had realized something much more painful. To her, I had been replaceable, just another chapter she could close without regret. For days I questioned everything. Was our love ever real? Did she ever truly believe in us? Or had she simply been waiting for someone richer to come along? I never got an answer, but as the weeks passed I began hearing stories. Richard bought her a luxury car, Dunder's bags, expensive vacations, a penthouse overlooking the city. She was living the dream she had always wanted, at least. That's what everyone believed. Even, I started believing it, until one afternoon, a phone call changed everything. The voice on the other end said something that made my heart stop. "There's something about Richard you need to know." I froze. "What are you talking about?" The caller took a slow breath before answering. "The woman who left you for him." has no idea who you really are. Those words echoed in my mind long after the call ended, because they were true. Emily thought she knew everything about me. She knew where I lived. She knew how I dressed. She knew the small business I ran. But there was one secret, one life-changing truth that I had never told anyone, and that secret was about to change all of our lives forever. People always say you never truly know someone until life gives them a choice. For 4 years, I believed Emily was the kind of woman who would stand beside me through anything. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't in love with who she really was. I was in love with who I believed she was. We met on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had stopped by a small bookstore after work, looking for a gift for my younger sister. Emily was standing on a ladder, trying to reach a novel from the top shelf. Before I could say anything, the book slipped from her hand. I caught it. She smiled. Perfect timing, she laughed. That smile was enough to make me forget why I had even entered the store. We talked for nearly an hour. Books turned into coffee. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long evening walks. Before I realized it, she had become part of my everyday life. Emily wasn't interested in expensive places back then. We would buy 2 coffees and sit by the lake for hours. Sometimes we'd grab cheap street food and laugh at people rushing through their busy lives. She used to tell me, money doesn't make people happy. Love does. Every time she said those words, I believed her because I wanted to. My business was small. I owned a digital marketing agency with only 6 employees. It wasn't making millions, but it paid the bills. More importantly, it was growing every year. I worked long hours. Some nights I didn't get home until midnight. Emily always acted supportive. She would leave little notes on my desk. Don't work too hard. I'm proud of you. One day all your hard work will pay off. Whenever I found those notes, they gave me the strength to keep going. I thought I had found someone who loved the man, not the money. There was only one thing Emily never understood about me. I was extremely private, not because I didn't trust her, because my father had taught me something before he passed away. Never tell people everything you own. The right people will love you without knowing. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now I know he was trying to protect me. So I never talked about family finances. I never discussed investments. I never mentioned old business partnerships. Even my closest friends knew very little. To everyone around me, I looked like an ordinary businessman living an ordinary life. And I preferred it that way. Emily sometimes asked questions. Why don't you buy a bigger house? Why don't you drive a luxury car? Why don't you spend more? I'd smile and say, I already have everything I need. She would laugh. You really are different. I took it as a compliment. Today, I know it wasn't. As the years passed, our relationship looked perfect from the outside. Our families got along. Our friends admired us. People often said, you two are relationship goals. Whenever someone said that, Emily would squeeze my hand and smile. I believed those smiles, every single one. When I proposed, she cried. At least, I thought they were happy tears. We were on the same lakeside bench where we had shared our first coffee. The sun was setting. The sky was painted orange and gold. I got down on one knee. Emily, will you marry me? She covered her mouth, then nodded. Yes. People nearby started clapping. A little girl even shouted. She said yes. It felt like the happiest day of my life. I had no idea it was only the beginning of my biggest lesson. Wedding planning began almost immediately. Emily threw herself into it with excitement. She picked venues, flowers, music, photography. Everything had to be perfect. At first, I loved seeing her so happy. But slowly, something changed. She started comparing our wedding to weddings she saw online. This venue isn't luxurious enough. My friend's wedding had better decorations. Maybe we should upgrade the catering. Every conversation seemed to end with spending more money. I didn't think much of it. Planning a wedding is stressful. Everyone says that, so I ignored the small warning signs. Then came the conversations that made me uncomfortable. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Emily showed me a picture of a famous businessman's mansion. "Can you imagine living there?" I smiled. "It looks nice." She looked at me seriously. "I don't just want a nice life. I want an extraordinary life." There was nothing wrong with dreaming big, so again, I ignored it. Another mistake. A few weeks later, she started talking about successful men more often. Not their kindness, not their character, their wealth. "Did you see the car he bought? They travel first class everywhere. They own 3 vacation homes." At first, I laughed. Then I noticed something. Whenever she spoke about those men, her eyes sparkled. When she talked about our future, they didn't. One night she asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "If someone offered you $10 million to leave me, would you do it?" I laughed. "Never." Then I asked the same question. She smiled. "I don't know." She said it jokingly. At least, that's how I chose to hear it. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. Still, I pushed those thoughts away, because love has a strange way of making us blind. When you truly love someone, you don't look for reasons to doubt them. You look for reasons to trust them. I convinced myself I was overthinking. I told myself every relationship has moments of uncertainty. I believed our love was stronger than temporary doubts. I couldn't have been more wrong. 2 months before our wedding, everything seemed normal. Emily kissed me goodbye every morning. She texted me throughout the day. She still said, "I love you." And every single time, I answered, "I love you too." I had no idea those words were slowly losing their meaning, because while I was working late to build our future, someone else was quietly stepping into my place, a man with more money, more luxury, more status. And Emily was already beginning to choose him. I just hadn't seen it yet. The worst part? The heartbreak wasn't waiting at the coffee shop where she ended our engagement. It had started weeks earlier, right behind my back. The weeks leading up to our wedding should have been the happiest time of my life. Instead, they became the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. At first, the changes were so small that I barely noticed them. Emily started canceling our dinner plans, saying she was busy with work or meeting friends. Her replies to my messages became shorter, and the long phone calls we used to have every night slowly disappeared. I kept telling myself not to overthink it. Wedding planning was stressful, and everyone deals with pressure differently. One Friday evening, I arrived at the restaurant where we had planned to meet. I waited for almost 40 minutes before my phone finally buzzed. "I'm so sorry. Something came up. We'll meet another day." That was all she wrote. No explanation, no apology beyond those few words. I looked around at the couples enjoying their dinners, laughing together, and quietly left the restaurant alone. A few days later, one of my friends called me. "Hey, I don't want to start rumors," he said carefully, "but I saw Emily having dinner with a man I've never seen before." I laughed it off. "Probably a business client." "I hope you're right," he replied. I wanted to believe him, but something inside me felt uneasy. When I asked Emily about it that night, she didn't seem nervous at all. "He's just someone I met through work," she said. "You're worrying over nothing." I nodded and let it go, because love makes you believe excuses you would never accept from anyone else. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us grew even wider. She became harder to reach. She smiled less whenever we were together. It felt like her body was with me, but her heart had already gone somewhere else. Then one evening, everything became clear. I was walking through the city after finishing work when I saw a luxury sports car parked outside an expensive hotel. Standing beside it was Emily. She was laughing. Not with me. With him, Richard. He looked confident, wearing an expensive suit and a watch that probably cost more than my car. He opened the passenger door for her, and before getting inside, Emily looked at him with a smile I hadn't seen in months. A smile that used to belong to me. I stood across the street, unable to move. She never noticed I was there. That night, I finally understood what had been happening. It wasn't work. It wasn't stress. It wasn't wedding pressure. She had already chosen another life, a life filled with luxury, expensive vacations, designer clothes, and everything money could buy. The next morning, I asked her one simple question: "Are you in love with him?" She stayed silent for several seconds, then she quietly answered, "I think he can give me the life I've always dreamed of." Those words hurt more than any argument ever could. She didn't say she loved him more. She didn't say I had failed her. She simply believed his money could offer a better future than my love ever could. At that moment, I realized I had already lost her, not to a better man, but to a bigger bank account. As she walked away, I thought my story was over. I had no idea it was only the beginning, because the one thing Emily never discovered about me was the secret that would soon change everything. After Emily left, my apartment became painfully quiet. Every room reminded me of the life we had planned together. The framed photos, the unopened wedding gifts, even the coffee mug she always used. They all felt like memories from a different lifetime. For the first week, I barely left the house. I ignored calls from friends and family. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, but I wasn't ready to explain that the woman I loved had chosen someone with a bigger wallet. One evening, while cleaning the living room, I noticed an old wooden box on the top shelf of my closet. It had belonged to my father. I carefully opened it. Inside were several folders, a silver watch, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. Seeing his handwriting brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years. My father had always been a successful businessman, but you would never have guessed it by looking at him. He drove an old pickup truck, wore simple clothes, and treated everyone with respect. He often told me, "Real wealth is quiet. It doesn't need to prove itself." When he became seriously ill, he gave me one final piece of advice: never let people love your money before they love your heart. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. Now, his words echoed in my mind louder than ever. The folders inside the box contained documents that only a few people in the world knew existed. Years before he passed away, my father had quietly invested in several technology companies. Most people thought those investments had been sold long ago. They hadn't. After his death, they became mine. Over the years, those investments had grown beyond anything I had imagined. Combined with the profits from my own business, they had quietly made me financially secure for the rest of my life. I wasn't a billionaire, but I had far more than enough to live comfortably without ever worrying about money again. No one knew. Not my friends, not my employees, and certainly not Emily. I had chosen to live a simple life because I wanted people to value me for my character, not my bank balance. Emily often wondered why I drove an ordinary car or lived in a modest apartment. The truth was simple. I didn't need expensive things to feel successful. I wanted a partner who would choose me even if she believed I had nothing. That choice had become the greatest test of our relationship, and Emily had failed it. She walked away believing she had left an average man behind. She had no idea she had also walked away from a future she had always dreamed about. But something inside me changed that night. For days, I had been asking why she left. Now, I started asking a different question. Why should I keep mourning someone who had measured my worth with money? I folded my father's letter and placed it back inside the box. A small smile appeared on my face for the first time since the breakup. I wasn't smiling because I was rich. I was smiling because I finally understood the lesson my father had tried to teach me. Some people leave when they think you have nothing. Those same people often regret leaving when they discover what they walked away from. Emily still believed she had made the best decision of her life. She had no idea that fate was already preparing a surprise she would never forget. The morning after I read my father's letter, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the man staring back at me. My eyes were tired, my shoulders were heavy. For weeks, I had allowed heartbreak to control my life. That ended that morning. I made myself a simple promise. I wasn't going to chase Emily, and I wasn't going to beg her to come back. And I definitely wasn't going to prove my worth to someone who had already decided I wasn't enough. Instead, I was going to prove it to myself. I threw away the wedding brochures that had been sitting on my dining table. Every picture of our future together disappeared into a cardboard box that I placed in the attic. The memories would always exist, but they would no longer control me. Then I turned my full attention to my business. For the first time in months, I arrived at the office before anyone else. I met with my team, listened to new ideas, and approved projects I had been putting off. The pain inside me slowly became fuel. Every hour I had once spent thinking about Emily was now spent building something bigger. Within 3 months, our company landed its largest contract ever, then another and another. Our small office quickly became too crowded. We moved into a larger building, hired more employees, and expanded into new cities. Watching my team succeed gave me a happiness that no amount of revenge ever could. One afternoon, my assistant walked into my office with a smile. "Congratulations," she said. "A business magazine wants to feature you in their next issue." I almost laughed. A year earlier, no one knew my name. Now people wanted to hear my story. I accepted the interview, but I never mentioned Emily. There was no reason to. She belonged to my past. The article was published 2 weeks later. It wasn't about my money. It was about hard work, discipline, and staying humble. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years started calling to congratulate me. Even strangers recognized me at business events. Life was changing faster than I had ever imagined. Then one evening, as I left a conference, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your success. It's been a long time." I didn't need to ask who it was. I already knew. Emily. I stared at the message for a few seconds before locking my phone. Months ago, I would have replied immediately. Now, I simply slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked to my car. Some messages don't deserve an answer. Some chapters are better left closed. As I drove home, I smiled, not because Emily had noticed my success, but because, for the first time since she left, her opinion no longer mattered. The man she had walked away from no longer existed. I had become stronger, wiser, and more confident. Not because I wanted to make her regret her decision, but because I had finally learned to value myself. Little did I know, fate wasn't finished writing our story. In just a few days, Emily would walk back into my life. Only this time, she would be the one asking for a second chance. 6 months after Emily walked away, fate brought us together in the last place I expected, a charity fundraising gala hosted by one of my business partners. I almost didn't attend, but something told me I should. The ballroom was filled with successful business owners, investors, and reporters. I was talking with a client when I noticed a familiar face standing across the room. Emily. For a moment, neither of us moved. She looked almost the same, but the confidence she once carried was gone. The bright smile I remembered had faded, replaced by tired eyes that seemed to be hiding months of disappointment. Then she slowly walked toward me. "Daniel?" she said softly. I nodded. "It's been a while." She looked at me as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. I was dressed in a tailored suit, surrounded by people congratulating me on my company's recent success. "You've changed," she whispered. "I guess we both have," I replied. For a few seconds there was only silence. Finally, she looked down and said, "I owe you an apology." I didn't interrupt. She took a deep breath. Richard wasn't the man I thought he was. I wasn't surprised. She explained that after a few months together, she discovered he cared more about appearances than people. Everything in his life was about status, money, and showing off. He rarely had time for her, and every conversation felt like a business meeting instead of a relationship. The expensive gifts stopped making me happy. she admitted. I realized too late that I had traded real love for a life that only looked perfect. I listened quietly. There was a time when hearing those words would have made me happy. But not anymore. She looked into my eyes, her voice shaking. I made the biggest mistake of my life. For the first time, she understood what she had thrown away. Not my money, not my success me, the man who had loved her when life was simple. The man who would have stood beside her through every challenge. Tears filled her eyes. I wish I could go back and choose differently. I gave her a small, respectful smile. The past doesn't work that way. She nodded, knowing I was right. As she walked away, I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I felt peace, because I finally realized that the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's becoming so happy with your own life that their choices no longer have the power to hurt you. And in that moment, Emily finally understood the price of choosing wealth over loyalty. It was a lesson she would carry for the rest of her life.